I'm Libby Roughead from the Quality Use of Medicines and Pharmacy Research Centre at the University of South Australia, and I'm delighted to be here today to give you some reflections from Australia on drug utilisation review, opportunities and future directions. I want to thank the organisers for the invitation to speak today and to say I'm honoured to be here with you all. I want to congratulate you on the 10-year anniversary of HERA, the Drug Utilisation Review System. It's a system that I often talk about around the world and say we all need a system like Korea. It's world leading, and I know that many of us can learn from the good work that you do. I've been working on drug utilisation review and research to support Australian pharmaceutical policy since 1995. It started when I began evaluating Australia's national strategy for quality use of medicines in 1995. I've been a member of the Australian Drug Utilisation Subcommittee of our Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee since 2001, and I'm still a member today. And I run the Veterans Medicines Advice and Therapeutics Education Services Program, which is a data-driven program to improve veteran healthcare. So today, I want to highlight how we use drug utilisation review to support listings and use of medicines on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. And I also want to highlight how we use drug utilisation review to support healthcare improvement and show you some examples of how we used it during COVID. As background, we don't have a national linked health data set, but we do have prescription dispensing data available nationally. We've had a national data set since 1990. We've had the Drug Utilisation Subcommittee since 1998. It's a patient-linked data set since 2003, and it's relatively complete for all medicines dispensed to patients since 2012. Covers about 90% of our prescription medicine use. We have real-time claims processing that we established in 2004, but we don't have much in the way of real-time drug utilisation review. We established our National Data Exchange in 2018, and that does enable real-time monitoring of controlled substances, predominantly opioids and some benzodiazepines. All Australian states and territories have been participating since this year. We also have established e-prescribing and e-dispensing. The uptake is about 10% of all prescriptions this year. In terms of how we use drug utilisation review, increasingly the data are used by industry to support submissions for listing products and to support their budget impact assessments, looking at the market growth, looking at the potential comparator, the cost offsets if the medicine were to be used, the duration of use, persistence with use. Government use it in particular to assess the budget impact post-listing, to assess if use is in accord with our funded listing, to implement risk-sharing arrangements, to evaluate policy and regulatory changes, and for drug utilisation studies. So I wanted to show you some examples, and I was going to start with budget impact assessment. So all medicines subsidised under our pharmaceutical benefits scheme are required to have a budget impact assessment prior to listing. We started this in 2001, it became formalised in 2004, and then 24 months after listing, we do a drug utilisation review to see if both expenditure and use are as predicted. So I want to show you the example with deferasirox. Deferasirox was listed on the PBS for the treatment of chronic iron overload associated with disorders of erythropoiesis. In the budget impact, it was assumed that 4 years after listing, 80 to 90% of patients currently treated with desferrioxamine would switch to deferasirox. This graph on the right shows you what happened. A blue line shows you that deferasirox did become the market leader, and while use of desferrioxamine reduced a little, switching was much less common than expected, and most of the use was additional use. And so we had a situation where expenditure was double that was predicted. Delving into the data further, looking at who was using this by age and gender, we were able to see that most use was in men who were over 55. And delving into the use by strength, we were able to see most use was at the highest dose. And so much of the use was considered to be likely for myodysplastic syndrome, showing us that we have use outside indication because this was not a condition that we'd established cost effectiveness in. To overcome issues like that, the Australian government established a post-market review branch within our Health Technology Assessment Unit to look at reviewing cost effectiveness of existing listings. That was established in 2012. So one of the first examples I wanted to show you is we reviewed medicines for Alzheimer's disease. So the anticholinergics were listed on our pharmaceutical scheme for mild to moderately severe dementia. At the time of listing, the trials had shown that 24 to 36% of treated patients were responders to these medicines, compared with 15 to 21% of patients with placebo. So it worked in some, it didn't work in all. And so a continuation rule was put in place to ensure cost-effective use. And so to continue therapy beyond 6 months, the treating doctor had to confirm a 2-point improvement in the MIMI mental state examination. When it came to the drug utilisation review, we found, unlike the trial results, that 57% of patients received 6 months or more of treatment, with doctors confirming a 2-point improvement, and the median duration of use was 17 months. So this analysis set off a post-market review. The post-market review looked again at the utilisation, re-examined the evidence, and went out to all the stakeholders to gather opinions about use and what was expected. The review confirmed that medicine use was greater than expected and that the evidence which underpinned the original listing had not been changed. And so the PDAC recommended a 40% reduction in the price based on that review to make it come into cost effectiveness lines. And so what we saw is a great reduction in prices across those next few years. We can compare that with Korea because we have a different policy in the two countries, and this is what we saw. I've got Korea on the left and Australia on the right. You can see this is 2008 to 2019, and the Korean expenditure has kept increasing on the, medicines for Alzheimer's disease, while in Australia we see the dramatic drop in prices as a result of the post-market review. In terms of use, so this graph is utilisation in defined daily doses per 1,000 per day. Korea is use is increasing in line with those increasing costs. Whereas in Australia, you can see that we have stable use, relatively stable use, some switching within the market, but relatively stable use. Which shows us the potential for cross-country comparisons and how cross-country comparisons can help us with policy evaluation. And I think this has been some exciting work that I've been able to do with Korea, comparing things in Australia and Korea. And so I just want to show you another one, and this is evaluation of pricing policy. And this is looking at generic medicine pricing policy. Australia and Korea have relatively similar approaches to generic pricing policy. We both reference price. We both have mandatory price reductions when the first generic enters the market. Korea has more of a stepped pricing reduction program than we do, and a greater initial pricing reduction, whereas Australia has a first mandatory price reduction and then a price disclosure requirement where prices are then set based on selling price into pharmacy. So we looked at this with regards to atorvastatin and what happened when atorvastatin came off patent. And here you see we have the results for both Australia and Korea. The crosses mark the time when atorvastatin came off patent. So it came off patent in 2008 in Korea and 2012 in Australia. And what you can see in both countries is that we got quite a rapid decline in price following the generic coming onto the market. And so in both countries, this would be considered success. We see the potential for extra information when we compare the countries, because while we were both successful in reducing the price, the Korean price in 2006 was 3 times the Australian price. and it was still more than 3 times the Australian price after the patent expiry, suggesting there might be other things we can do to support pricing policy. I want to change direction now and start to look at improving medicine use and how drug utilisation review supports improving medicine use. And I want to look at this program, Veterans Mates, which, as I said, it's a data-driven health promotion program, providing up-to-date health and medicines information for the veteran community and their healthcare team. It's been funded by the Australian Government Department of Veterans Affairs since 2004. We take the data, we identify healthcare issues and trends, but we also identify actual individuals in that data who might benefit if we were to recommend some changes in care to their doctors, with their doctors making those final decisions. And it's a multimodal intervention. We provide education to doctors, we provide education to veterans, and we provide very specific patient information to doctors about their patients, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. In 2009, we moved this from a paper-based intervention to a secure e-delivery intervention. So we are in the spot where we can deliver the patient information directly to the doctor's clinical desktop, and the doctor can incorporate that into the clinical record. And we've tested this compared to the paper version, and I want to show you that. The example where we tested it was with pain and reducing gabapentinoid use. This graphic on the left-hand side shows you what happened when pregabalin was listed on the PBS. We got rapid uptake in the country. The picture on the right-hand side shows you our electronic delivery to doctors, where we've identified for them the patient, we've identified the pregabalin in a time series over time by dose, and then we've identified, if they're on opioids, the opioid doses that they're also taking in oral morphine equivalents. We've given them some extra information that might assist people in managing pain, such as whether or not they'd visit a psychologist or whether they've had a medicines review. We've listed the medicines that actually make up the doses there, and we've given them suggested actions. And that information also has links so that they can click on it in the encounter if they want to go to our educational material. So the kind of educational material on the left-hand side, you see some of the information that went out to veterans themselves, 3 strategies to help decrease pain, moving, seeking support, changing how we think and talk about pain, and examples of that. And then on the right-hand side, looking more at the pain neuroscience for doctors, exploring understandings, self-management strategies, tailored psychological strategies, and then reviewing gabapentinoids. So what happened? Let me show you. We had a 13% fall in gabapentinoid use as a result of this intervention. This intervention did go out just at the time that COVID was happening, so that might have affected it a little bit. But we did randomise patients in this one, or randomise doctors, sorry, to receive e-delivery information or postal information. And we were very pleased to see that the effect size was the same for post and digital. So it didn't change. And in fact, for psychologist claims, which was one of the outcomes, we wanted to reduce the medicine use and increase the use of psychological referrals. Psychologist claims were better in the e-delivery group. And that's potentially because as the material comes into the doctor's clinical desktop, there's space in the software where they have to action it, and they can then set up a referral from the software. So it's possibly got the added advantage of making referral easy. One of the opportunities when we've got this kind of infrastructure in place is that we can build on it. And we've certainly done that with pain. And this is just to show you, we've actually delivered 4 pain interventions over time. We started with this one here that we call the M3 approach, which was mind, movement and medicines to introduce the biopsychosocial approach to pain. We followed it up with helping to solve the pain puzzle, where we introduced the neuroscience, pain neuroscience to GPs. We followed that up with understanding your pain, where we introduced pain neuroscience to the veterans themselves and provided them with cognitive tools that they could use. We provided doctors with tapering guides and catastrophizing scales, and then we followed it up one more time again with recovering from pain. And so just to show you, these 4 arrows indicate where those interventions happened and how opioid use has shifted in Australia. The tail of this is also affected by regulation change to respond to overuse of opioids in the community as a whole. But here's our opportunity to graded learning over time for people with this kind of technology. The other thing that this technology enabled us to do is respond in COVID. And I was very pleased to see that HERA had been able to do something quite not similar, but in the same vein. So across last year, we absolutely focused on keeping people well during COVID. In March 2020, Australia went into lockdown and we established national telehealth services. We didn't have widespread use of telehealth before COVID. Information, as you all know, about the pandemic and that health kind of information was changing daily. And so e-delivery became a critical mechanism for us to get up-to-date information to doctors. So the very first thing is we identified how many clients we had who were at risk of poor outcomes if they were to contract COVID. And more than 100,000 people in our veteran population were at high risk. Not only did we identify which risk factors they had, we also looked at the number of risk factors that people had, and a large number had 3 or more risk factors. We provided that information to doctors. So we wrote out by e-delivery, we sent information to the doctors saying, here are your patients who meet the risk for poor outcomes. Make sure they stay connected, make sure they know what to do. And we also provided that information out to the veterans themselves, telling them how to access telehealth, how to get the medicines delivered to their homes so that they didn't need to go out and to get a flu shot. We had long lockdowns in Australia, and that also meant that we had a cohort who were vulnerable to mental health exacerbations. And so we followed up in July with identifying for the doctors the veterans who had a history of mental ill health. And again, we provided to doctors information about their patients who may be at risk, and we provided them with tools, and we provided these tools to the veterans themselves that they might be able to use. And they were short tools that we thought people could use in the general practice encounter. A 90-second video to understand the stress response, a 2-minute video to look at controlled breathing for calming emotions, and a 90-second video to look at guided grounding, again for calming distressing emotions. We went out a 3rd time, so this is just our timeline in more detail, because by September, in many states and territories in Australia, lockdowns were ending, and we had a focus on re-engaging the population, getting people active again, getting people re-engaged with their communities. We can often evaluate our work with epidemiological analyses, but I wanted to show you this one where we have a response, a letter written in to say thank you for our recent Veterans Mates document. It made me feel that someone actually cared about my health and supplied tips to assist myself and wife in control and handling the COVID virus. We found the information most useful. It made me or us feel that to DVA we were not just ABC, not just another number. The personal touch, even from such a large department, makes us feel just that little more special and respected as seniors in the community. And they go on to note that they're quite concerned about the COVID virus due to their age and their conditions. I think this is a really nice example where the digital can meet the personal and the opportunity for us to connect in ways to people. Our rapid response to COVID, a bit similar to the HERA example, was possible because we had that existing data infrastructure built. We had existing clinical teams in place who could review that evidence rapidly. We had strong stakeholder support. We have a veteran reference group and a practitioner reference group, and we went out to them with the materials before we delivered them saying, what do you think? And they gave us some very good advice. And of course, that ability to deliver directly to the clinical desktop was crucial for it being out same day. So I want to finish there. But over the course of my career, I've just watched data become ever more central to decision making. drug utilisation becoming more important over time and with a greater role in pharmaceutical decision making. I think the opportunities that are emerging with real-time data availability are amazing and exciting, providing us with opportunities for knowledge discovery, preemptive harm prevention, proactive healthcare decision making, and really able to respond where need is in the pandemic. HERA has been at the forefront of this globally, and so I congratulate you once again and look forward to following your continued achievements, which support us all as we strive to improve medicine use and reduce harms from medicines both locally and globally. Thank you very much.